My name is Velkash Thur, and the moment I am about to describe is the moment I understood that everything I believed about winning a war was wrong. I was standing on the bridge of a picket cruiser at the edge of Kessari Deep when the empty sky in front of me turned into 400 warships in less than 2 seconds. There was no warning, no alarm, no blinking light on the sensor board to tell me something was coming. One moment I was watching 300 slow transport ships drift quietly through open space. The next moment, we were surrounded. I remember gripping the edge of my console so hard that my knuckles ached. My first thought was not fear. My first thought was confusion, because everything I had been taught said this could not happen. Our sensor net around that system was layered 7 times over. Nothing could cross into that space without 4 separate systems screaming a warning at least 2 full seconds before it arrived. Yet there we were, sitting inside a wall of enemy ships that had appeared from nothing, engines cold, weapons already aimed. A voice came through on an open channel, calm and steady, with no fear in it at all. "This is Fleet Admiral Renata Osai, Terran Remnant Fleet, formerly the Sol Defense Force. You are inside human space. You have 30 seconds to begin your withdrawal." 30 seconds. For a fleet of that size with slow transports full of sleeping colonists, 30 seconds was nothing. It was less than nothing. It was a joke, except nobody on that channel was laughing. I need you to understand what made this moment so impossible, so you can understand why every one of us on that bridge went pale and silent at the same time. 4 months earlier, we had won the war. I use that word carefully now because I no longer believe it means what I once thought it meant. The war against Earth had lasted 11 years. It began the way most wars begin, with a dispute nobody wanted to end peacefully and a misunderstanding that grew teeth. When it started, our side had 800 warships spread across 2 fleets. Earth had 40. I remember an officer named Dressel laughing about it in the mess hall, placing bets on how many days the whole thing would take. 40 ships. It sounded like a formality, a mistake someone made in a shipyard, not a fleet. 11 years later, we had destroyed all 40 of those original ships, plus every reinforcement Earth built to replace them. We had taken 6 of humanity's 7 major colonies, and finally, after 400 days of relentless bombardment, we reached Earth itself, the homeworld, the last stronghold, and we found silence. No defense grid answered us. No warships rose to meet us. Just smoke and gray oceans, and cities that had gone dark one after another, until the whole planet looked like a coal left over from a fire that had burned itself out. Our commanding officer, a woman named Asarai, stood on the bridge of our flagship and declared victory. I was standing 2 rows behind her, and I felt only relief. 11 years is a long time to be afraid of a species that started the fight with 40 ships. I did not weep for anyone that day. I poured a small measure of wine on the observation deck that night and watched it float in the low gravity, catching the light of a dying star, and I felt something close to happiness. We should have asked ourselves a simple question before we celebrated. If humanity built 40 warships when they still believed they had time to prepare for war, what would they build once they understood they had none? We never asked that question. That is why we were unprepared for what happened at Kessari Deep. After the fall of Earth, most of our forces pulled back to that system to refit and to escort new settlers who wanted to claim what was left of humanity's worlds. I was given a quiet post there, watching over the harbor while ships came and went. It was considered a boring assignment, the kind given to someone who had lost too many friends in the war and needed time away from real fighting. I did not complain. I was tired in a way that had nothing to do with my body. 4 months passed in that quiet posting. 4 months of nothing happening, of colonists arriving in slow transports, of officers talking about how the war was finally, truly over. And then the sky lit up. I stood frozen on that bridge, watching 412 ships appear around us as if they had simply stepped out of the dark. My display showed weapons already charged, engines already positioned, formations already locked around our own fleet like a hand closing around a wrist. There had been no gap in our sensor coverage. There had been no mistake in our patrol routes. These ships had simply not been there, and then they were all at once with no transition in between. Our commanding officer at the time, a man named Koruthane, gave the order to engage without hesitation. I respected him for that, even as I watched what came next unfold in ways that made my hands shake on the console. These were not the same 40 ships we had destroyed over 11 years. I understood that within the first minute, as my squadron's shields dropped by half from weapons that matched nothing in our threat records. These were new ships, sleek and fast, built by people who had spent over a decade losing every visible battle, and had apparently spent that entire time asking themselves exactly what those losses could teach them. I did not learn the full truth until later, from a captured logistics officer who was willing to talk more than I expected. What she told me changed the way I understood the entire war, and I have not been able to stop thinking about it since. When Earth went dark under our bombardment, it was not dying. It was performing the largest deception I have ever heard of. Every city that fell silent had already been emptied. Every silence we mistook for defeat was actually an evacuation completed just ahead of our attack. While we were burning the surface of that planet, humanity was building an entire second fleet in the deep ocean trenches and beneath mountains of solid rock, in places our scanners could never reach and our satellites could never see. The 40 ships we destroyed over 11 years were real losses. Real people died in them. Real grief followed each one. But those ships were also something else. They were a shield, a visible war fought in front of our eyes so that the real war, the one happening in the dark beneath the surface, could continue without our knowledge. 412 warships, built in secret, crewed by people who watched their homes burn on the surface, and decided that instead of surrendering, they would disappear and build something we would never see coming. The officer told me something that has stayed with me longer than anything else from that conversation. She said the hardest part of the entire plan was not the building or the hiding. It was the waiting. It was watching us declare victory over their ruined homeworld. It was watching our transports arrive to divide up the ashes of everything they had ever known. It was staying silent through 4 months of occupation, saying nothing, doing nothing, because the only way the plan could work was if we believed completely that they were gone. They let us grieve nothing. They let us believe everything. And then, when we were most comfortable, they turned the lights on. The fight at Kessari Deep did not last long. I checked the official record afterward, and it says 11 minutes from the first shot to the final retreat order. 11 minutes was enough for our fleet to lose more than half its ships. 11 minutes was enough for me to watch cruisers I had served beside for years vanish from the tactical display one after another, their crews gone before anyone could even issue an evacuation order. I want to describe what that 11 minutes felt like, because I think it matters more than the numbers. At first there was disbelief. Officers around me kept repeating that this could not be right, that the sensors must be malfunctioning, that no fleet this size could have been built and hidden without a single hint reaching our intelligence networks. Then there was fear, quiet and cold, the kind that makes your hands steady even while your mind is screaming. And then there was something else, something I did not expect. There was a strange kind of respect. Even as our formation broke apart around me, even as I watched ship after ship go dark on my display, some small part of me understood that we were witnessing something extraordinary. A species we had declared extinct had built an entire second fleet in secret, waited 4 months in complete silence, and struck at exactly the right moment to catch us at our weakest. My own ship survived because we were stationed at the very edge of the formation, far from the center where the heaviest fighting took place. When our commanding officer gave the order for the outer ships to break formation and retreat, I did not hesitate. I have thought about that order many times since. I have wondered whether it was the right choice, whether staying would have made any difference, whether running was wisdom or simple fear. I have decided the answer does not matter anymore. That order is the reason I am still alive to describe what happened. As my ship pulled away from the battle, I watched something else unfold on a secondary display, a signal relayed from the direction of the homeworld itself. The fleet that had been left behind to oversee our occupation of Earth received the exact same message we had: 30 seconds to withdraw. It came from a second human fleet, one that had apparently been sitting completely silent in the far outer reaches of their own solar system for the entire 4 months of our occupation, waiting for the same signal that triggered the fleet at Kessari Deep. I watched Osirai's flagship attempt to reach the boundary needed to escape into faster travel. I watched it fail to make it in time. I do not know what happened to her after that, and if I am honest with myself, I do not want to know. What I do know is this. 4 months ago, I stood on an observation deck and celebrated the end of a species I believed we had defeated completely. I was wrong in a way that should worry every commander who ever leads a fleet into battle again. We did not defeat Earth. We defeated the fleet Earth allowed us to see, the visible sacrifice offered up so the real fleet could be built in silence, deep underground, far from anything we could detect. And while we spent 4 months congratulating ourselves on a victory that felt complete, that hidden fleet waited patiently in the dark for the exact moment we stopped watching the sky. I am recording this account from a small lifeboat drifting at the edge of the debris field left behind at Kessari Deep. I do not know how many other ships from our side survived. I do not know how far the human fleet intends to push now that they have revealed themselves. I only know what I witnessed, and I believe it needs to be recorded honestly, without exaggeration and without denial, because I fear that whoever reads this next will need to understand exactly how we were deceived. There is one thing I keep returning to as I drift here, waiting for a rescue signal that may never come. It is something the captured officer said to me before she stopped speaking entirely. She told me that her people had a saying passed down through generations of soldiers. One, she said, explained everything about how they fight wars they cannot win through simple strength alone. She said that when a human species runs out of ships, out of resources, out of any visible way to fight back, that is exactly the moment you should worry the most, because it means they have stopped fighting where you can see them and started fighting where you cannot. I did not understand what she meant until I watched 412 warships appear out of nothing around our own fleet. I think about the 11 years of war differently now. I think about every visible loss humanity suffered, every city we burned, every colony we conquered, every fleet we destroyed in open battle, and I wonder how much of it was real suffering used as a shield for something else entirely. I wonder how many of those defeats were allowed to happen because letting us believe we were winning was the only way to buy enough time to build what came next. It is a strange kind of courage, the kind that lets you watch your own homeworld burn without revealing the one thing that could save it, simply because revealing it too soon would ruin the plan. I do not know if I could have done what they did. I do not know if anyone on our side could have endured that kind of patience. The transmission we received before the battle began still plays in my mind on a loop. 30 seconds to withdraw. It was not a threat delivered in anger. It was calm, almost gentle, like someone giving a fair warning to an opponent they respected enough to offer a chance, even if that chance was far too short to matter. I have decided that the calmness is what frightens me most. A fleet that has been driven to the edge of destruction does not sound calm when it finally strikes back. A fleet that has been planning its return for years, confident in its preparation, sounds exactly like that. I keep thinking about the moment our sensors finally caught up with what was happening around us, the moment the tactical display filled with 412 contacts, where there had been none just seconds before. I think about how quickly disbelief turned into fear, and how quickly fear turned into chaos, and how none of it mattered in the end, because the outcome had already been decided before we even understood we were in danger. There is a report I intend to file once I am recovered, if I am recovered, recommending that our command structure reconsider everything we believed about victory and defeat. A species that appears defeated is not always defeated. A homeworld that goes silent is not always broken. Sometimes silence is the loudest warning of all, and we simply lack the wisdom to hear it. I think about Renata Osai's voice on that channel, steady and unshaken, giving us 30 seconds as if that were somehow generous. I wonder what she and the people under her command endured during those 11 years to reach a place where they could sound that calm while facing down an enemy fleet 20 times their original size. I wonder how many nights they spent building ships in the dark, listening to reports of their own cities falling, and choosing silence anyway because they understood something we never did. Patience can be a weapon sharper than anything mounted on a warship. My lifeboat systems are limited, and I do not know how long this signal will carry before my power runs low. I want to leave behind a clear record of what I saw, because I believe the lesson here is too important to be lost along with the ships and crews we left behind at Kessari Deep. Do not assume silence means surrender. Do not assume an empty sky means safety. And do not, under any circumstances, celebrate a victory over a species that still has ships, still has crews, and still has the will to fight, no matter how quiet they have become. We thought Earth had no fleet left. We told ourselves that story for 4 months, and we believed it completely, right up until the moment the stars around Kessari Deep filled with human warships that should not have existed. I do not know what comes next for the Dominion, or for what remains of our forces scattered and retreating across this system. I only know that whatever comes next will be shaped by people who spent 11 years learning exactly how far they could be pushed before they decided it was finally time to push back. This is 3rd Talon Velkosh Thur, closing this transmission from the edge of Kessari Deep. If anyone receives this signal, know that the war we thought was finished has only just begun again, and this time, we are the ones who do not know what is coming.